Hello.
It's Eleanor here.
Trevor here.
And we are from Topocata Animation. We're an animation studio based in Hertford, UK.
Yes.
And we specialise in our own technique, which involves paper puppetry and motion capture.
Yes, and this is for all you creative types out there who are looking for tips and tricks from a small professional studio like us.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
And we're on episode 18.
My goodness.
And this is called Podcasting on a Budget, Part 2.
Part 2. Yes, we did a Part 1.
So last week was Part 1, and that was about the physical recording and sort of setup of the podcast.
Absolutely. So, and Part 2, this bit is going to be all about editing and publishing your podcast. So most of it is going to be talking about computer stuff, the program. But don't be put off.
No,
we'll try and make it as interesting as possible.
It is interesting because it allows you to actually do the thing.
Yes.
So
before we do that, we're going to do a quick shout out. I want to do a shout out to Mark, who's my cousin, who sends comments in occasionally, letting us know if our podcast sounds too quiet or quiet compared to lots of other people.
Yes, he's sort of audio expert.
Things, yeah, he is. He's very much a tech wizard. So that's very useful for us, actually. That's another podcast tip, I guess, is have someone who can actually give you feedback.
Yes.
In a very much a third-person way. They've heard it. Does it sound quiet? Does it sound one person sound quiet in comparison to another?
Yeah.
All that stuff. So that's quite good.
Quite valuable.
So, yes.
And the other shout-out is to Sebastian.
Yes. Now, Sebastian...
who gave us they both gave comments on our YouTube channel.
Yes.
And his was a really good suggestion that we should actually, on the YouTube channel, have rather than a static image, which we have at the moment, a moving, maybe looping movie.
Well, that would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
we are animators after all. But I'd like to say we've got a good excuse. The reason it does a static image is because of the way that it uploads the podcast to YouTube. Which
we will be going into later, but you're going to have a look at that
I'm going to have a look at that and see
if there's a workaround.
How we can get around it, because YouTube doesn't actually allow you to swap out a video after it's been published, whereas Vimeo does, YouTube does not. So I've got to think of a way around it. It might mean that we need to do it manually.
Right, yes, yeah.
So we'll have to see. But anyway, let's get started. I'm going to talk first about the audio software.
Yes.
Now, we did mention it before. Yep. It's called Reaper.
This is what we record on.
So we've got our microphones plugged into our computers, and we've both got Reaper on each respective computer, and so they're recording at the moment.
So you end up with 2 recorded tracks.
Yes, 2 recorded tracks that you need to bring together into one project.
Yes.
So we're going to place a link to Reaper Audio, and it's basically audio editing software, but you can do a lot more than that.
I mean, it is actually very extensive, isn't it? So it could be complicated.
We've got a huge manual.
Yeah. It also is quite intuitive. So if you need to go in at a certain level, it can be really accessible, basically.
Yeah, we would say don't be put off, because it's good to have a bit of audio software where you can do lots of things. You don't have to, but the options are there, so you don't get stuck.
Yeah, so you're not restricted.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're not bamboozled by all of these sort of, possibilities that are wrapped up in different buttons and everything else. So I think it's a good one to start with. It is.
And of course, there's always plenty of YouTube videos and things like that to help you, which is what I use to kind of get to grips with the various aspects, because we're not audio experts.
No, this is definitely a learning curve for us as well. We're just trying to impart some of what we've learned that could be useful for others at this stage as well.
Absolutely. So, once you've got your tracks into Reaper or she's putting her hand up.
I put my hand up. I just wanted to mention that Reaper is got sort of an evaluation period that you can use it for free.
Oh, yeah.
So you can check if it's right for you.
Yes.
And then if you're an individual, educational or not-for-profit organisation, or you don't earn over $20K
dollars,
a year, it's $60. And then once you're over $20K, it goes up to $225, I think. But it's worth going for because of that free trial. You can test all of it as well. They're not restricting you as many do.
No.
So it's worth having a look. But there are others out there.
There are others out there, and we're definitely not being sponsored by any of the things that we mentioned. Not yet. But we've just found it really useful, and the evaluation is great because you can evaluate it for quite some time and get used to it and see whether it's going to be absolutely something that you can gel with. So I think from that aspect, it's definitely something to try.
So on to editing.
Back to editing, yes. So once you've got your tracks in, so we've, as we say, recorded our tracks separately, and there's on one track and mime on another. And then we actually, when we start any podcast, I think we mentioned this, we do 3 claps. Mm-hmm. So they appear as sort of waveform spikes on each track that we can line up together.
So that's equivalent to a clapperboard on a film.
Exactly, yes. So you've got something to line the 2 tracks up because we've recorded them separately.
Yeah.
So you might have started your recording slightly differently to mine. So we need to line them up. So we clap 3 times at the beginning, so there's distinct spikes on the waveform that we can line up.
And also we're learning that it'll be useful to do that at the end, just to check so it hasn't sort of drifted in any way. Yeah,
it does slightly. And I think that's not necessarily through the editing process. I think that I'm going to have to work out why that is. But it does definitely drift slightly. But yes, so we're going to clap at the end of this so we can remember to do that. So once you've lined those 2 tracks up, our 2 various recordings, then you can lock those 2 together. They just group together. And that means they stay in sync. You can chop them up how you want, but essentially they're just going to stay in sync. Yeah.
So you chop my ums out and you chop
so
your
yes,
silences.
We should mention what we're editing. We are editing out ums and gaps and fluffs and all sorts of things.
Sneezes.
I think we're getting better, actually. So the editing process is getting a little bit less troublesome.
Right.
But yes, you want to basically avoid too many ums and ahs and things like that, I think. It's just annoying to listen to, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So, and Reaper has a very good way of blending clips together. So if you're cutting out a chunk and then you want to then blend the 2 halves together. Yeah, you can just drag them together and they overlap beautifully and merge. And
so there's no pop.
It stops audio pops, because that's something that can happen with the very basic audio software. If you're just chopping bits up and pushing them together, you can get some very weird audio pops when things cut from one bit of audio to another. But in Reaper, they just blend nicely together automatically. So that is just a fantastic little bit of feature to have.
So the other thing that Trevor does is adjust the pan. So that basically means that one of us is in one ear and the other is in the other. So we're not sat on your shoulders. That would be weird, but just slightly. So it's clear that we're in 2 different spaces. It's more of a 3-dimensional kind of experience.
Yes, it's a subtle thing. Don't go crazy with the pan. That basically means that you can push one voice towards one speaker or one left side of the headphones and the other person to the other, so that we sound in a slightly separate space, but not like other sides of the room. Yes, and not if you don't use pan at all, well then we're occupying the same space in your head. That's a bit weird too. So just a little shift, I think, does make a difference, a good difference. It absolutely does. Because it's multi-track in Reaper, you've got all the audio controls for each track. Mm-hmm. So you can get those all balanced out. We're not going to go too in depth with what you can do in Reaper because there is more nuanced stuff, and maybe I'll do a video on it at some point. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. But I think we just outline some of the features, and then you know that they exist and what the sort of thing you have to take into account. Yeah. One of the other things we do is noise reduction. We did mention that, I think we mentioned that we record silence at the start of our podcast. So that's basically to capture background noise. With most microphones on a budget, especially if they're USB cables, you'll get a background hiss, and you can get rid of that largely by recording a bit of silence so that Reaper can understand what the background noise is. What's happening, yeah. Yeah, and then it knows what to subtract from the rest. Yeah, that's recording. Makes sense. So that's a good first thing to do. And then I use a compressor which essentially means that when I do a loud laugh, you don't have to suddenly whip your headphones off because it's too loud.
Mm-hmm.
Or if we're speaking softly, you don't have to suddenly turn the volume up on your headphones.
Yes. So it's basically consistency on the volume.
Exactly. So it's bringing the louder sounds and the quieter sounds closer together. So you get a more even, balanced recording. And it means that the person listening doesn't have to fiddle around with their volume controls.
Yes, yeah.
And then, well, the last plugin, because these are all plugins that mentioned, this is quite a nice way Reaper works with just little extra plugins that you can add, is a treble enhancer.
Yes.
We should call it the Trevor enhancer because I only use it on my track in the recording, and it's to brighten up the voice. Because Eleanor's got a nice sort of clear, crisp, beautiful voice. And
beautiful.
Mine's a bit muffly. So I use this treble enhancer to enhance the sort of higher sounds, the higher pitch sounds.
Well, that's quite handy, isn't it?
Make it a bit clearer, yes. And then at the end of it, so that is sort of whizzing through it a little bit, we output an MP3 file because you can output any format, but MP3 seems to be the best one for file size.
Right, yes.
A lot of these services actually only allows a certain
size
limit.
Yeah.
On Squarespace, it's the website builder that we use. It only allows 160 megabytes on a file.
So some of these web files are huge.
Yeah, some of the files would come out huge. Ours is about 50 megabytes for 20 minutes.
Right.
As an MP3. That's pretty good. And yes, as we mentioned, we use Squarespace. So whatever website builder you use, they should have a podcast aspect to it.
Yeah.
I'm going to describe what it's like in Squarespace so you can then try and match it up in your own service web builder. Yeah. But in Squarespace, it's basically done through the blog, and you basically just blogging your podcast. So you start your blog as you would in any normal blog, but you add an audio file. In Squarespace, it's an audio block.
Right, yes.
And within that audio block, there's all sorts of settings for podcasting. And then all that's doing then means that you can connect with any of these podcast services, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, YouTube, Apple, thank you. They all look for what we call an RSS.
That's for free.
And it's for free, yes. They're all for free. They all look for what's something called an RSS feed. Something that people might know about if they've ever signed up to an RSS feed on a blog. They'll get notifications whenever there's a new blog, basically. So
that's an email to their inbox?
It isn't necessarily. It can be that you sign up to a feed, RSS feed service.
Like Feedly.
Like Feedly, for example, yeah. We use Reader, but there's a few. And they sort of notify you whenever somebody posts a new blog. So this RSS is basically something on your website that tells other services when you've updated your blog.
Right. So they do it sort of periodically.
Yes.
So if you update it, then it will be updated in those other services as well.
Absolutely. So once we've recorded our podcast, we've got our MP3 audio file. We'll put that in a blog as an audio block and adjust all the settings for podcast, what episode it is, and all the other various details, the description and the links. Mm-hmm. And all those details are then taken and put to the RSS feed on our website. And any of those podcast services will then look at that RSS feed and be able to extract that information and the audio file and format it in their own way.
Present it. Right. So basically you've gone and set up each one of these to begin with. So you've set it up to feed into each one of them separately. Yes. And then ongoing, it does it automatically. Yeah,
which is brilliant. So once you've done your blog, your podcast blog, you don't have to worry about it because you know it's going to go to all these other services. But yes, you do have to go into, for instance, Spotify, set up an account with Spotify, and there's various directions on, YouTube videos and things like that to show you how you can do it.
Right, yeah.
But yes, you sign up with them, then you get like a podcast account that you can log into. Mm-hmm. And they will ask somewhere along there what the RSS feed address is. So I can post a link about how Squarespace does that, so that if anybody's got another service, they can look for a similar thing, I suppose.
Yes,
but we might be able to find a link that helps on that regard. You do have to make sure how each of these services then takes that information and uses it. So, for instance, we found that not every single service uses the links.
Right, allows links, yes.
Yeah. So Apple Music and Audible, we've noticed that the links that we put in the description to help people out with where they can go for various things, they just turn up as they're not links, they're just words.
Right, but they can copy and paste them, presumably.
No, not even that,
Oh,
because I don't put them as a web address.
Oh, I see.
It's not necessarily very helpful to people.
Right.
YouTube is the best, actually, because it takes the description, it puts them in as links, and it also gives you the web address. So it does the most comprehensive thing, and you can leave comments.
Yeah.
So it is one of the better services, and it might be that we end up thinking, well, YouTube is one of the best ones for getting feedback and for posting in the first place. It's
an ongoing kind of issue that we're sort of looking into, and we will sort of report back.
Yeah.
But it's because also it's about the analytics. Are you spreading yourself thinly by going to all these different areas?
Absolutely.
But at the same, so therefore your analytics are less kind of intact.
Yes.
Or are you collecting all these different people from different services that might not actually know about you had you not done that? So it's a kind of weighing up what's going to be important. And I think we're going to be looking at that in the future.
Definitely.
To make a decision on that ourselves.
So a lot of these podcast services, obviously people know that YouTube has analytics, and of course our website has analytics, but Spotify and a lot of the others do too. So that gives you a chance to see where you're picking up traction, and a lot of the services will tell you how far into your podcast people are still listening. And various, so it's useful in terms of content, not just, for knowing which of these services are going to be the most useful to us in the future.
Right.
So, we're going to be keeping an eye on the analytics. And I suppose the last thing is publicizing your
telling
podcast.
People about it. Yeah.
Telling people about it. It's no use doing all these podcasts if you don't actually let people know that it exists.
Yeah.
Because although a lot of these platforms like Spotify will occasionally appear on them, part of the analytics does say how often they're putting you in front of people.
Right.
How much we
believe that. But what does that actually mean? That's some of the language, sometimes impressions. What does that actually mean? Is it's worth kind of thinking about. But definitely the best way is if it's on our own website and blog.
Yeah.
And then if you sign up for the mailing list, even better.
Yes.
But
there is that. Publicising it, we put it onto LinkedIn and Twitter, or X are our main ones.
Yeah.
And we do that as an actual clip, video clip. I don't think you tend to do audio clips on those services. So we do add video to the audio clip.
And you've done it so that it's got a little kind of bar thing.
Yes, a little waveform.
That shows that there's actually something happening audibly.
Yes.
So if you're looking at it with the sound down, you can see there's something going on.
There's something going on. So I will post a link to one of those as well. So if you're on any other service apart from Audible and Apple Music, you'll be able to click on the link.
Right, yes.
And see what we've done. And basically, you're limited to the length that you can post if you're on their free service. So I think for LinkedIn, it's maximum 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And for Twitter X, it's 2 minutes is maximum.
Right.
So we just post, I would say, a select snippet, but it's usually the beginning.
Selective, the beginning.
Yeah.
Which is the same every time.
So people can actually hear it.
Right.
And then...
Think about that.
Yeah. And then if they want to hear more, then they can click on the link.
Yes. Absolutely.
But we're going to be trying various things, aren't we? So this is an ongoing process, and we kind of let people know about it. Okay, well, we are going to leave it there. And if you want to make comments, you can do so.
Do.
Please do, yeah. We do find them really useful.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to get
So if you
comments.
can go to, you can go to our site, topocator.com, and I'll leave a link for those who can actually click on links. So if you're on Audible, don't bother. Just go to topocator.com. We've got a podcast blog page
Yes.
that you can go to, and you can comment on various
Or
episodes.
if you're on YouTube, we always pick them up as well.
Absolutely. And anything else we want to pitch? No. Well, sign up to our mailing list. Is always a good one. Well, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.